Howdy everybody. I'm Buzz Smith, the EV-angelist, and I spent the last 6 years of my career in a totally new area for me. It was automotive sales. I thought that car salesmen were constants, so I never thought that would be what I would do for a living. But my life was changed by a car accident. I got rear-ended, totaled my car, gas was $4.50 a gallon. I'm thinking about getting a two-seat sports car, which my wife vetoed, and the next step was, well, gas is so expensive, and my wife was a smart one. I was not the smart one. She said, let's try one of these electric cars. 2 months later, she got one. A year later, we got one for our daughter, and it completely changed my life. And my dealership hired me, and I sold electric vehicles. I sold all the vehicles the dealership sold for 6 years. But 35% of all of my sales during that time was electric vehicles. So one of the things that I've had to do over those 6 years, from 2013 through 2019, was learn how to dispel all the myths there are about electric vehicles out there. And there's basically 3 types of myths. There are the myths where the person saying this thing to you has never owned an EV. They don't know what they're talking about, but they've heard through the grapevine that this is the problem with EVs. Or it's somebody that doesn't want you to get an EV, or at least not yet. And so they maybe write a news article that seems like it's in favor of EVs, but they put some doubt in your mind, and the idea is that you're not going to get that car for 5 or 6 more years. And then there's the outright malicious lies, and yes, those exist out there. So we're going to talk about what some of these myths are, and we're also going to talk about how you handle them when you're out in the world, because they'll show up in social media over and over and over, the exact same errors over and over. So in that first step, not understanding the EV world, you've got people saying, oh, charging is too complex. You know, you've got a plug for a Tesla, you've got a plug for a Nissan, you've got a different plug for an American car. And those same people every week pull up to a gas pump that's got 3 hoses hanging on it. How do they figure out which one to put into their gas car? It's just stunning to me, because they can't figure out 3 plugs, but they can figure out 3 hoses. So we know right off the bat, that's got to be a myth. They talk about range anxiety, and what I would tell people about range anxiety, if you've never owned an electric vehicle, you know what, you've already had range anxiety. You ever been on your way to work and you're on fumes? I mean, that thing is on E, and you're wondering, can I make it? I'm running late, I gotta get there, I don't have time to stop, and if I do stop, when I leave work, can I make it to a gas station? It will be an expensive one, or can I get to one where the gas is a decent deal? That is range anxiety in the gasoline world. They'll say that the price of the car is too high. A lot of times they don't even know that there are government incentives. But the big thing is not just the government incentives. It's that in the world of electric vehicles, we've got to think about the cost of the vehicle differently. We've got to look at total cost of ownership, because the problem is they don't understand how cheap electricity is and how efficient electric motors are. And once you sit down with them and show them how much they're going to save on fuel, it eliminates that doubt from right off the bat. And the quick one that I'll do is I'll just tell them, you know what, in Texas it's easy to get electricity for 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and you can go 4 miles on a kilowatt hour. So 8 divided by 4 is 2 cents per mile. That's pretty cheap. If gas is $2.70 and you've got a car that gets 30 miles per gallon, that's 9 cents per mile. And that's just for the gasoline. That gas car also has fan belts, spark plugs. It's got oil filter, transmission fluid, transmission filter. All these things have to be serviced that don't even exist in the EV. And when you start putting all those costs together and you look at the total monthly cost of owning that electric vehicle, it turns out to be less expensive than the gasoline car. They also think that all of us that buy EVs are tree huggers. Now, I have sold electric vehicles to staunch conservatives, staunch deniers of global climate change. People don't buy cars just because they're good for the planet, or at least 99% of us don't. We buy it because it's a damn good looking car, and it has great acceleration, and it corners wonderfully. And so one of the first things I do, and this actually gets them from even bringing up the myths, is I take them out and put their butt in seat, and we go drive that car. We get on a straightaway, and I tell them very seriously, now look, I want you to hold on to that steering wheel with both hands. Make sure you got a good grip. Now punch it to the floor. Then we'll go through a couple of curves real fast, and that car doesn't even tilt because it's got such a low center of gravity. The questions stop. All these myths that they've been fed just stop. And the question they ask at that point is, how fast can we get back to the dealership so we can get the paperwork started? And that was my goal. A lot of them think that all electric vehicles are econo boxes and commuter cars. Well, this year, the pickup trucks start coming out. And in 46 states in the United States, pickups are more popular than sedans. Only 4 states are sedans more popular. And so the Rivian just hit the market, or just hit production for customers this week. Lordstown is supposed to before the end of the month. And in very rapid succession, you're going to see GMC bring out their Hummer. You're going to see truck after truck after truck coming out. So it's not going to be just the crossovers and just the commuter cars. We're going to see electric vehicles morph into that next stage, which is the adventure vehicle. And to prove it, we took an electric vehicle from the dealership where I used to work. We put a kayak on the roof. We stuck 2 bicycles off the back. We folded the back seats down, and we loaded this Golf EV with as much camping gear as we could possibly get into it. And we went camping in the middle of nowhere. The nearest DC fast charger is 40 miles away, and we had no problems at all. We had a wonderful time. And so we documented that and got that out in front of everybody. A lot of people talk about long road trips. You can't do a long road trip in an EV because there aren't enough chargers. And when you do have to stop, you got to stop for 4 hours. No, that's not true. And those of you that drive EVs probably already know this. But the mass in America just doesn't. They think you've got to stop for hours at a time. And you know what? You can hide the time. And this is what people don't think about. Sooner or later, you've got to stop to eat. You got to stop for a bio break. I took a 637-mile trip just here in Texas, Fort Worth to Austin to Houston and back. We did it in one day. I think it took us about 17 hours. We stopped for charging, 2 full charges, and then one was like this 15 minutes to make sure we had some padded range. But we had we mapped it out so that we stopped and had meals. And so by the time we finished eating and walked back to the car, it was at least 80% charged. We jumped in and went. That was time we would have spent outside of the car and then just sitting in a parking lot anyway. It didn't really change our trip. And now I'm planning a trip from Denver to Olympia, Washington and back. And we're going to do 1 full charge stop during the day. And then the second charge each day will be done at a hotel overnight at what's called level 2 charging, much slower, but who cares? I'm going to be asleep anyway. So we masked, one of the stops in a meal and the other one when we stop at the hotel to eat. So that long road trip issue is not true unless you're the kind of person that likes to get in a car and just drive for 24 hours straight to get to that destination. What my wife and I discovered on that trip into the middle of nowhere was, just like they say, life is a journey. An EV trip is a journey. Take some time. If you stop to charge the car, see what's around that area. We ended up, that charger that was 40 miles away was in Kerrville, Texas. We went down there to get a charge. Right across the street was a nice Mexican restaurant. We went in and had some great lunch. The next time we went into the town to charge, we decided to explore the town. They had a wonderful city park that had a river running through it, so we took the kayak down there and dropped it in and went paddling around. They had bicycle trails, so we unloaded those bikes and took them riding around. But we ended up loving the time that we spent stopped to charge because we just stopped driving and we took a breath and we enjoyed the journey. Now, the second type of myth that we talk about with those seemingly supported myths, some example of that is, man, EVs are great and God, it'll be wonderful once we have enough chargers to support these cars. Well, as my trip illustrated, for a lot of long distance trips, we have all the chargers we need. The other thing that Americans don't seem to understand is you are going to charge at home 99% of the time if there's an outlet you can plug into. You don't need a 220 outlet. You don't need a level 2 charger because the average American drives less than 40 miles a day. You can recoup that in 10 hours of charging. You get home at 6, your car's full by 4 a.m., you've been asleep, having dinner, watching TV, while your car is filling up in the garage, and each day that you leave your house, you're leaving with a full tank. It's not like a gas car where every day you've got less and less and less, and if suddenly there's a tornado, a hurricane, a forest fire these days, you've got to get the hell out of Dodge. Well, guess what? The electric car guy's car has a full tank. And you've been waiting for that once-a-week gasoline station trip, so now you've got to find a gas station that has gas, because everybody else with a gas car is trying to get out of town too. So yes, we do need more chargers over time, but it's going to happen like the cell phone industry did. Do any of you remember driving from one major city to another major city, and there was this big dead zone where you couldn't make cell calls? Well, what the hell did you buy a cell phone for? They're useless. You can't make a phone call in the middle of nowhere. Why would you do that? The same thing with an electric vehicle. Why would you buy an electric vehicle if there are a few places that maybe you can't get to? Well, because they're going to fill in. As electric vehicle adoption goes up, EV charger installations are going to go up. It's just the way economics works. It's not that you can't get an EV now because there aren't already a million chargers. Go and get one. Have some fun. They're a blast to drive. Now this is kind of serious because this happened to me. In 1985, the oil industry had a major collapse. And I was born and raised in Houston, like everybody else in Houston. The first 10 years of my career after high school, while I went to college, I was working in the factory as a manufacturing engineer in the oil industry. So when oil collapsed, Houston's devastated. People are losing their houses, and investors are going in and they're buying people's houses on credit cards. It was that bad. And I had to leave Houston to even get a job and lost my house. So there will be changes in the way that people are employed. There are going to be jobs that go away forever. But what we haven't thought about is all the jobs that will be created. If you're out there today building oil pipelines and you're a welder, guess what? You can weld on our bridges that we have an infrastructure bill to work on. So there's going to be long-term employment in the future in that. When we look back at these new industries that came along and what started them, when they first started, we didn't realize what they were going to be. Think about when the internet first came out. You're on a dial-up modem, you know, and you get in, and it's so slow. And it's kind of a novelty, and it's not really ever going to be anything, but at least you've got mail. Well, guess what? That entire world sprung up around the internet. Now you've got people that their entire job is writing code or building hardware or installing hardware for the internet to run. You've got giant data centers that have been built to keep that internet running. We think about the space program. A lot of people thought back in the 60s we should spend that money on Earth. We shouldn't be wasting it sending it to the moon. But we learned how to remotely monitor the health of those astronauts. Well, guess what? Now you go into a hospital and the nurse doesn't have to come in your room just to make sure your heart is beating every few minutes. You've got a nurse sitting at a station. She's monitoring multiple rooms at the same time, multiple patients. And so these things bring us jobs that we never thought of, opportunities we never thought of before, and EVs will be the same way. And we can't even imagine what's going to be coming. But yes, we absolutely have to realize the way people make a living are going to change, and some of those people are not going to get jobs in their same industry. But that's the way it is when things start progressing as fast as this. My grandfather worked for the same company his entire life. My dad worked in the same industry his entire life, but maybe for 4 different companies. I've had at least 6 different careers in my life. Some successful, some EV-angelism. That's just the way it goes. But the fact is, I've loved this life. I've gotten to learn new things all through my life. And when people get to the point that they hate their jobs and they say, thank God it's Friday, what they're really saying to themselves is, I am so freaking bored. I need to go find something that lights up a passion with me, something that's fun to do again. And that's why progress is so much fun. It is not a bad deal that you don't work for the exact same company for 50 years. It's actually a good thing. Now, finally, the last type of myth that you have to worry about are the ones that are absolute lies and are absolutely malicious. I've seen a giant strip mine, this huge crater, and the person that posted it said, how do you like this, EV people? How green does this look? This is a lithium mine. No, it wasn't. It was the world's largest copper mine. Another meme showed what was supposed to be this beautiful forest with a couple of industrial-looking small installations, and they said, this is a tar sands field. No, it wasn't. It was a bitumen-producing field. So there are these things that are out there that are absolute lies, and they're easy to debunk. But they keep coming back. Every 3 or 4 years, you'll see it pop up on social media. It's the same lie again. You've got to go shoot it down again. Well, there's something that was said to me at one point, and that was, there is some time that it's just time to give up arguing. There's no reason to argue about face masks or viruses or how the election went or all the stuff that we argue about that each side thinks they're both completely right. There's a point that you reach that where you're realizing that what you're doing is like trying to teach a pig to sing. You just should walk away because all you're going to do is annoy the pig. Thank you. The timer wasn't working. Did I run over? Anybody got any questions? Yes, ma'am. If you would go ahead and pull that down so I can hear you. I'm hard of hearing. Okay. He's got a microphone for you. Everybody will be able to hear you. Now you're good.
Can you speak to the myth about, or is there a myth about sustainability of the lithium battery?
Yes, thank you very much. One of the things that happened just within the last year is lithium deposits were discovered in England, and the amount was so much that they can build 400 million battery packs for consumer cars. In the case of General Motors, they just signed a long-term lease out at the Salton Sea in Southern California to harvest the lithium that's there. Lithium is the third lightest element in the periodic table of elements. It is not something like diamonds or oil that you're going way down into the earth to get. Typically, this is something that is located where there used to be an inland sea that dried up. And in that salts that settled, that's where the lithium is. So you're just scooping this stuff off the top surface. It's not hard to get. It's not going to be bad for the environment. And best of all is when that battery pack is no longer usable in the car, you're going to move it over to maybe your house to do backup for the energy that your solar panels are going to getting. And then when it's not any good for that anymore, we recycle that battery because that lithium that's in there and the other components that are in there are just too valuable to throw away. And already you've seen manufacturers like Ford and Volkswagen actually show diagrams of battery recycling factories. So this is something that's coming in the very near future, and it's actually great for the world. Yes, sir.
Favorite electric car you've driven?
I'm sorry.
Favorite electric car that you've driven?
Wow. I think that I'm a cheap guy, so a $90,000 car doesn't really, a $90,000 car doesn't turn me on, but ludicrous mode in a Tesla P100 Model S was pretty amazing, and I really like that. But I'll tell you, the Volkswagen ID4 is a very, very nice vehicle. At a slightly lower price point, the Bolt EV is a very solid vehicle, very nice design. Yes, they've got a battery recall going on, but trust me, it's going to get fixed. And that's another thing. When these manufacturers in this whole new industry have a problem, what have we seen them do? Hyundai went in and just replaced the battery packs in a lot of their cars where there was an issue, and they found out that it was a manufacturing issue. They fixed it, they took care of their customers, and they moved on. General Motors is already committed to replacing every battery module and every Bolt EV and Bolt EUV, even the ones that haven't been bought yet. And they've only had 5 fires per 75,000 cars. That's another myth, when they talk about electric vehicles catching fire. Why is it that Americans don't realize that 200,000 gasoline cars catch fire every year in the United States? And it's never on the front page of the New York Times. It's never on the front page of CNN.com that an old Chevy caught fire. It's only if it's an electric vehicle, and especially if it's a Tesla, because that's great clickbait, and it builds that myth. The fact of the matter is, electric vehicles have a much lower incidence of fire with gasoline. How many of you have ever seen a gasoline car on fire in person? Let's see a show of hands. How many of you have seen an electric vehicle on fire? 2. And obviously there are a lot fewer electric vehicles, but I had a neighbor down the street, Cadillac that they normally parked in the garage, just a fluke. One night they parked it out in the driveway. In the middle of the night, somebody must have broken in the car because the horn is just honking on and off, on and off. They go running out outside. Well, it's honking because it's shorting out because it's on fire. And the insulation around the wires was burning. But the car burnt to the ground in their driveway. And if it had been in the house, the master bedroom was just above the garage. It's a nightmare situation. So, don't come at me with the cars are going to just burst into flames. That's just not true. If there are no more questions, can I get an amen for electric vehicles? Come on, amen. Thank you.